Hi everyone! Today we're driving across the Salt Flats so that Trails and Tastes of the Southwest can visit Carlsbad Caverns National Park. The caverns are located about 20 minutes from the city of Carlsbad in southeastern New Mexico. They're about a 3-hour drive from El Paso, and the drive takes you through the Guadalupe Mountains National Park as well. Here we are pulling into the parking lot of the Visitor Center. We arrived at about 11 in the morning, and the parking lot had many cars, but there were still a few spots to park. The view from the parking lot is pretty impressive, though it's also quite windy here at the top of the mountain. The park's website suggests creating a timed entry ticket, but we were able to wait in a short line to buy walk-up tickets with no hassle. Then, we got to walk around through the displays that educate you about the park. There are displays on cave formation, fossils, wildlife, and the history of the park. There are recommendations of what to do based on the time you will spend in the park, and you're allowed to touch these replicas of stalagmites, though you aren't allowed to touch anything inside the actual cave. This scale model of the caverns shows you the two ways to enter the park. You can take the elevators, the shaft is modeled in clear plastic, or you can do what we did and enter the cave through the natural entrance, which is a short walk from the visitor center. If you take the natural entrance, you'll be descending about 750 feet along the trail. It's a strenuous walk and pretty steep. Though, once you get to the big room, the cave really flattens out. If you take the elevators, a lot of the cave is even wheelchair accessible. Near the back of the visitor center was a room that had an informational movie about Carlsbad Caverns and the wildlife that live in this unique national park. After watching the video, we headed out the door and down the path to the natural entrance. There's one last chance to use the bathroom and a short briefing with the park ranger before you reach the Bat Amphitheater at the mouth of the cave. As you walk down the path, you are greeted by a giant chasm with what looks like bats at first. But closer inspection shows that these are birds. The bats come out of the cave around sunset. As you get closer, you start to realize how big this natural entrance is, and how dark it is in the cave below. If you look carefully at the side of the cave wall, you might realize why these birds are swarming around the entrance. They're making nests here. Once you get out of the direct sun, the temperature immediately begins to fall. Even though it's the middle of summer, I brought a light jacket because the temperature in the cave is 56 Fahrenheit or 13 Celsius year-round. The path starts to get significantly steeper, and there are places where it might be wet, so shoes with a good grip are also a must. As you go down the switchbacks, it's interesting to look back up and see just how far you've descended, knowing that this is just the beginning, as well as to enjoy the natural light while it lasts. Soon, the cave starts to get a lot darker and closes in for a short while, before opening back up into the Bat Cave. While there's still some natural light, this area is dubbed the Twilight Zone. If you look at the far side of the cave, you can see the first stalactites hanging from the ceiling. Because there is no cell phone reception in the cave, there are emergency phones installed along the path periodically. Even though this is called the Bat Cave, I didn't see any bats hanging from the ceiling, so I assume they're hiding over there in some of the darker areas of the cave. Here's what I think is the first stalagmite I've encountered. And as we go around this turn in the path, this is the last time we'll see natural light for a few hours. Speaking of light, I should talk a little bit about photography inside the cave. I saw lots of people trying to take pictures inside the cave using cell phones. While some will be successful, many will come out blurry and grainy. This segment was filmed on my cell phone, and you can see it's really struggling with the low light conditions. Switching to a real camera with a larger lens makes a huge difference, and it's much closer to what your eyes actually see. To take good pictures inside the cave, having the right equipment helps tremendously. The path kept descending further and further down, until we came to this formation, which is called the Whale's Mouth. Do you see it? Then, the path continues to descend, and passes through a somewhat smaller passage before opening up into a fairly large chamber, where you can see this pretty impressive formation. We passed some backlit stalagmites before passing this really tall and skinny one. You can't really appreciate the size of it until you've seen people standing next to it. After descending a bunch more, we came to this iceberg rock, a giant rock that fell from the ceiling, blocking the path. This is literally the tip of the iceberg, because the entire rock is larger than a typical house. On the underside of Iceberg Rock, the stalactites that survive the fall are all at a weird angle. And this is an old wooden staircase that once led visitors around Iceberg Rock. After passing Iceberg Rock, there's an area with some really cool, porous-looking walls. Then, we finally arrived in the big room. The big room has helpful markers that show you your location and how to get to other places, like restrooms and exits. And the path is packed with really amazing things to see, like this stalagmite and stalactite that are almost touching. Some formations are named, like this stalactite is called the Lion's Tail. The whole big room is full of stalagmites, stalactites, and columns. This one almost looks like an ancient Roman column. And what is this area of 3 to 5 foot tall stalagmites that almost look like coral? It's called Fairyland. It was formed from water dripping from these stalactites above. Here's a pair of neat-looking columns. And this formation is called the Temple of the Sun. You can take a shortcut across the big room here if you're tired, but there are some really neat things that you'd miss if you do. Like this little pool of water that's created a flat surface at its top. There's a rope that was left by some early explorers, and here's a rope ladder that some others might have used. Imagine climbing down that thing with only the light of a lantern. From this overlook, you can see the lower cave. The picture doesn't do it justice, but for reference, it's about 200 feet down from this overlook. There are some neat stalagmites, and here's a neat pool of water. This almost looks like the back of a giant animal's mouth. There's a seating area at the top of the cross, but to see the cross, you actually have to lay down on one of the benches and look upward. Can you see the cross? Let me know in the comments. This is Mirror Lake. When you get the angle right, you can read the sign in the water. And what kind of craziness resulted in these rock formations on the ground? This is called the bottomless pit. Even with a flashlight, you can't see the bottom. There are places where the big room opens up, and you can see a long way. These are called the rock lily pads. And for some reason, this reminds me of a walrus. Finally, we get to the Crystal Spring Dome, the largest active stalagmite in the cave. It's made mostly of calcite, which gives it its brilliant white color. A close-up shows that it's wet because it's still growing. I'm not sure if I see a fish or Pac-Man embedded in this wall. This is called the Rock of Ages. And here's an interesting looking area. This looks like an underground river. And this window perfectly frames that column. This is an area full of small columns and soda straws. It's called the Dolls Theater. If you watch carefully, you can see water dripping into this pool. And this area, though dimly lit, is called the Chinese Theater. By the time we made it to the lunchroom, the snack bar and underground shops were closed. So, there was nothing left to do but wait for the elevators and ride the 750 feet back to the surface. When you exit the elevators, you will be at the bookstore. The store sells mostly educational materials, like books, though they do have other things like cups, puzzles, shirts, patches, and bookmarks. Sales in this store directly benefit the national parks. I particularly enjoyed this wall of stuffed animals that are all native to the park. The other side of the visitor center has the gift shop and restaurant, though the restaurant was already closed by the time we got there. This gift shop was much larger and had many souvenirs and products from both Carlsbad Caverns and New Mexico in general. We could have stayed a couple more hours to watch the bats take flight, but we didn't want to make the long drive back home in the dark. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you never miss anything here on Trails and Tastes of the Southwest. See you next time.